What if I told you that being abandoned by your own family on the biggest shopping day of the year would become the moment that changed everything? That 6 hours standing alone in a line would teach you more about yourself than 23 years of living ever had. My name is Irish White, and this is the story of how Black Friday 2024 became the day I stopped being invisible in my own family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
I never thought much about being the middle child until I realized I'd been apologizing for existing my entire life. Growing up as Irish White in suburban Columbus, Ohio, meant being sandwiched between my older sister Madison's perfect grades and my younger brother Tyler's athletic achievements. While Madison collected acceptance letters from Ivy League schools and Tyler dominated the soccer field, I collected part-time jobs and the label of the responsible one. At 23, I was still living in my childhood bedroom, painted the same lavender color I'd chosen when I was 12. The walls were covered with participation ribbons from high school clubs I'd joined, hoping someone would notice me, and college brochures I'd never had the courage to send applications to. My parents, Robert and Catherine White, ran a successful accounting firm downtown, and our two-story colonial house in Worthington reflected their practical, achievement-oriented mindset. Every family dinner felt like a board meeting where I was the unpaid intern. Madison would video call from her corporate law internship in Chicago, regaling us with stories about multi-million-dollar deals and late nights at prestigious firms. Tyler, now a freshman at Ohio State on a partial soccer scholarship, would share updates about upcoming matches and recruitment interest from professional teams. Then the conversation would inevitably turn to me. "Irish is doing great at the department store," my mother would say, with the kind of forced enthusiasm reserved for participation trophies. "She's been promoted to senior sales associate." The title sounded impressive until you realized it came with a 50-cent raise and the responsibility of training new employees who often moved up faster than I did. Working at Eastland Mall's Meridian department store had never been my dream job, but it had become my reality. I'd started there during high school to save money for college, but somehow 4 years had passed and I was still folding sweaters and smiling at customers who treated me like part of the fixtures. My manager, Patricia, was a woman in her 50s who'd worked retail her entire life and seemed determined to ensure I followed the same path. "You're reliable, Irish," she'd tell me during my performance reviews. "Customers trust you. You have a real knack for knowing what people need." What she meant was that I was forgettable enough that people felt comfortable around me and desperate enough for approval that I'd work overtime without complaint. My social life reflected the same pattern. I had friends, sort of. There was Jenny from work, who invited me out when her other friends weren't available. There was Marcus from my community college marketing class, who texted me when he needed help with assignments. There was Sarah from my yoga class, who was perfectly pleasant during our hour together each week, but never suggested meeting outside the studio. I'd perfected the art of being useful without being essential, present without being memorable. At family gatherings, I was the one who helped in the kitchen while everyone else relaxed. During friend outings, I was the designated driver who made sure everyone got home safely. At work, I was the employee who covered shifts when others called in sick. The irony wasn't lost on me that I worked in fashion retail but dressed like I was trying to disappear. My wardrobe consisted of neutral colors and conservative cuts, clothes that wouldn't draw attention or invite comments. I'd learned early that standing out in my family meant setting yourself up for comparison, and comparison meant falling short. My bank account told the story of someone living paycheck to paycheck despite working full-time and living at home. Every dollar was accounted for. Gas money for my 12-year-old Honda Civic, student loan payments for my 2 years at community college, and small contributions to household expenses that my parents insisted on. I'd been saving for my own apartment for 3 years, but unexpected expenses kept depleting my progress. The most painful part wasn't the financial struggle, or the dead-end job, or even the social invisibility. It was watching my family plan a future that didn't include me in any meaningful way. Madison talked about the law firm she'd join after graduation and the Manhattan apartment she'd been researching. Tyler discussed his major in sports management and the internships he was pursuing with professional soccer teams. Then the conversation would inevitably turn to me. Irish is doing great at the department store, my mother would say, with the kind of forced enthusiasm reserved for participation trophies. She's been promoted to senior sales associate. The title sounded impressive until you realized it came with a 50-cent raise and the responsibility of training new employees who often moved up faster than I did. The week leading up to Black Friday had been particularly difficult. Madison was home for Thanksgiving break, filling the house with her internship success stories and law school application updates. Tyler had just received interest from a semi-professional soccer team and was considering transferring to a Division I school with a stronger athletics program. Then the conversation would inevitably turn to me. Irish had come with us on Black Friday, my mother had announced on Thursday evening. She knows all the stores at the mall, and she can help us find the best deals. It was presented as an invitation, but I recognized it as what it was, a request for my services. They needed a shopping guide, someone who knew the layouts and sales patterns, someone who could navigate the crowds efficiently. I should have said no. I should have claimed I had to work or made other plans. Instead, I heard myself agreeing, even volunteering to research the best deals and create a shopping strategy. Because that's what I did. I made myself useful and hoped that usefulness would translate into belonging.
The night before Black Friday, I stayed up until 2 a.m. creating a detailed spreadsheet of store hours, doorbusters deals, and optimal shopping routes. I researched which stores would have the shortest lines, which items were likely to sell out quickly, and which locations offered the best prices on the electronics Tyler wanted and the designer handbags Madison had been eyeing. As I finally went to bed, I felt that familiar mix of hope and dread. Maybe this would be the day I proved myself indispensable. Maybe my family would see how much thought and effort I put into helping them. Maybe I'd finally earn a place at the table that wasn't just about being useful. I had no idea that Black Friday 2024 would be the day everything changed. Not because I finally got the recognition I craved, but because I'd learned the difference between being needed and being valued. The lesson would come at the cost of 6 hours standing alone in a line, but it would be worth every minute of discomfort, every moment of abandonment, every second of realizing that I'd been waiting my whole life for permission to live. The alarm was set for 4 a.m. My family shopping list was organized and prioritized. My comfortable shoes were laid out beside my warmest jacket. Everything was ready for what I thought would be just another day of being helpful, of being the responsible one, of being Irish white, reliable, forgettable, and grateful for any attention thrown my way. I couldn't have imagined that by the end of the day, I'd discover who I really was when nobody was watching. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The alarm shrieked at 4 a.m., cutting through the November darkness like a knife. I'd barely slept 3 hours, but adrenaline kicked in immediately. This was it, Black Friday 2024, and I was determined to prove my worth to my family. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, researching deals, mapping routes, and creating what I believed was the perfect shopping strategy. My family gathered in the kitchen like soldiers, preparing for battle. Madison looked effortlessly put together even at this ungodly hour, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, wearing designer athleisure that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Tyler bounced on his feet, treating this like pre-game warm-ups, his energy infectious despite the early hour. My parents moved with military precision, checking wallets, phones, and shopping lists. "Irish, you have the master plan, right?" my father asked, adjusting his Columbus Blue Jackets cap. "We're counting on you to get us through this efficiently." I held up my carefully laminated shopping guide, complete with store maps, deal timelines, and backup options. Everything's here. We hit Electronics Emporium first for Tyler's gaming setup, then Madison's designer outlet stores, followed by the home goods section for Mom's kitchen upgrades. Perfect, my mother said, grabbing her oversized purse. You really are the most organized person I know, Irish. We'd be lost without you. Those words should have filled me with pride. Instead, they felt like a gentle reminder of my role, the coordinator, the planner, the one who made everyone else's success possible while remaining invisible herself. The drive to Easton Town Center took 45 minutes through empty streets lined with bare trees and early morning frost. I sat in the back seat between shopping bags and extra jackets, reviewing my notes one final time. The parking lot was already packed, despite the 5 a.m. opening time still being an hour away. Cars circled like vultures, their headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. Jesus, look at this crowd, Tyler muttered, pressing his face against the window. It's like the zombie apocalypse, but for discounted TVs. Language, my mother corrected automatically, but she was staring at the masses of people with the same mixture of fascination and horror. We parked what felt like a mile away and joined the migration toward the mall entrance. The crowd was unlike anything I'd experienced, even working retail during busy seasons. Families pushed strollers loaded with empty shopping bags. College students clutched energy drinks and looked like they'd been up all night. Serious shoppers wore comfortable shoes and carried military-style backpacks. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and barely contained chaos. People compared notes about deals, shared intel about which stores had the best inventory, and formed temporary alliances with strangers. I found myself energized by the collective excitement, feeling like I was finally part of something bigger than my usual routine. Electronics Emporium had a line stretching around the building. According to my research, they'd have the best deals on the 75-inch OLED TV Tyler wanted for his dorm room, plus the gaming console bundle he'd been saving for all year. The math was simple. Get in line early, secure our spots, wait for the doors to open at 6 a.m. Jesus, this is going to take forever, Madison complained, pulling her jacket tighter against the morning chill. How long do we actually have to stand here? About an hour, I replied, checking my phone. But this is the only place with Tyler's gaming setup at this price. The savings are worth the wait. What I didn't mention was that I'd been looking forward to this part. Standing in line meant uninterrupted family time, something that rarely happened at home between everyone's different schedules. I imagined us bonding over shared determination, maybe laughing about the absurdity of waiting in the cold for material goods. For the first 20 minutes, my fantasy held true. We talked about Tyler's upcoming soccer season, Madison's law school interviews, and my parents' plans to renovate the kitchen. I shared stories from retail trenches that actually made them laugh. The customer who tried to return a swimsuit in January, claiming it didn't fit the season. The woman who insisted her clearly used designer handbag was defective because it looked too worn. You should write a book about retail horror stories, Madison suggested. Some of these are genuinely hilarious. Irish has always been good with people, my father added. She notices things the rest of us miss. For a brief moment, I felt seen and appreciated for something beyond my organizational skills. Maybe this was the beginning of a new dynamic in our family, where my experiences mattered as much as Madison's academic achievements or Tyler's athletic prowess. Then, Madison's phone rang. "Oh my God, Jessica!" she squealed into the device. "You're at the outlet mall too? Which stores are you hitting?" I watched my sister's attention completely shift away from our family moment to her college roommate's shopping adventures. Within minutes, she was making plans to meet Jessica at the outlets after Electronics Emporium opened. Tyler, meanwhile, had struck up a conversation with a group of college guys ahead of us in line. They were debating the merits of different gaming setups and comparing notes about Black Friday strategies at other malls. His animated gestures and easy laughter reminded me why he'd always been the social one in our family. My parents had pulled out their phones and were handling work emails, discussing client concerns and year-end financial planning in hushed, professional tones. Even on Black Friday morning, their business demanded attention. Gradually, I realized I was standing alone in a crowd of hundreds of people, invisible, even to my own family members who were literally within arm's reach. The line moved incrementally forward as store employees prepared for the opening. The crowd grew larger and more restless. People behind us complained about the wait. People ahead of us shared rumors about inventory levels, but my family had mentally moved on to their individual priorities. "Mom," I said during a lull in her phone conversation, "should we stick together once the store opens? I can guide everyone to the right sections." "Oh, honey, that's sweet," she replied distractedly, "but we'll probably split up to cover more ground efficiently. You know where everything is, so you can handle Tyler's gaming stuff while your father and I look at the appliances. Madison will probably head straight to meet her friend." The plan made logical sense, but it completely undermined everything I'd spent weeks preparing for. My detailed shopping strategy assumed we'd stay together, that my knowledge and organization would keep us united and successful. Instead, I was being assigned the most time-consuming task while everyone else pursued their individual agendas. "But what about the coordination?" I pressed. "What if there are crowds or limited quantities or timing conflicts?" "Irish, relax," Tyler said, turning away from his new college friends. "It's just shopping, not a military operation. We'll figure it out as we go." Madison nodded absently while texting. "Yeah, we don't need to overthink this. It's supposed to be fun." Fun? The word hit me like a slap. For them, this was a casual adventure, a chance to score deals and socialize with friends. For me, it had been a carefully planned operation designed to prove my value to the people I loved most. At exactly 6 a.m., the Electronics Emporium doors opened, and the crowd surged forward like water through a broken dam. The careful line dissolved into a massive bodies pushing toward the entrance. I found myself separated from my family within seconds, carried along by the momentum of hundreds of eager shoppers. "Irish!" my mother called out somewhere behind me. "Meet us at the front entrance in 3 hours. You've got Tyler's list." 3 hours? I was supposed to navigate this chaos alone, secure Tyler's expensive gaming setup, and somehow coordinate with a family that had already scattered to pursue their own priorities. As I was swept into the store by the crowd, clutching Tyler's wish list and my carefully prepared notes, I realized this wasn't the family bonding experience I'd imagined. This was the moment everything I thought I knew about my place in the White family was about to be tested in the most unexpected way. The fluorescent lights were blindingly bright after the pre-dawn darkness outside. The store was a maze of displays and desperate shoppers grabbing items from shelves like contestants on a game show. Somewhere in this chaos, I needed to find a 75-inch TV, a gaming console bundle, and 3 specific accessories, all while my family enjoyed their freedom from responsibility. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and stepped into the fray. I had no idea that this would be the last time I would willingly accept the role of family coordinator without questioning what I was getting in return. The real lesson was about to begin. The inside of Electronics Emporium looked like a battlefield after the first wave of attack. Shoppers moved with predatory focus, their eyes scanning for discounted prey while clutching shopping carts like shields. The noise was overwhelming. Hundreds of conversations, beeping scanners, rolling cartwheels, and the occasional victorious shout when someone spotted their target item. I stood frozen for a moment, Tyler's wish list crumpled in my sweaty palm, watching families efficiently divide and conquer while I remained abandoned at the starting line. A woman with twin toddlers in her cart nearly ran me over as she rushed toward the laptop section, and I realized I needed to move or risk being trampled by more determined shoppers. Tyler's gaming setup was located in the back corner of the store, which meant navigating through every other department first. I pushed through crowds gathered around discounted tablets, stepped over boxes of headphones scattered on the floor, and dodged employees frantically restocking shelves that were being emptied as quickly as they were filled. The gaming section was a war zone. The 75-inch OLED TV Tyler wanted sat on a high shelf with a bright orange "Doorbuster Special" sign, but getting to it required joining a crowd of at least 30 people who were all shouting questions at two overwhelmed teenage employees. "Excuse me?" I said to the nearest employee, a kid who couldn't have been older than 17 and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I need the Samsung 75-inch OLED that's on sale, plus the PlayStation bundle with the extra controller and—" "You gotta take a number," he interrupted, pointing to a small dispenser attached to the display case. "We're doing this organized-like, but it's gonna be at least an hour wait, maybe 2. An hour wait, just to get Tyler's gaming setup? I checked my phone. It was already 6:30 a.m., and I was supposed to meet my family at 9. That would give me barely 30 minutes to complete the rest of the shopping after spending 2 hours in one section. I took number 47. The digital display showed they were currently serving number 12. The fear started as a small knot in my stomach. What if I couldn't get everything on Tyler's list? What if the items sold out before my number was called? What if I disappointed him the same way I disappointed my parents by being too slow, too disorganized, too incapable of handling a simple shopping trip? "First Black Friday?" asked the woman next to me, holding number 48. She was probably in her 40s, wearing a Black Friday Survivor t-shirt and carrying a military-style backpack filled with energy bars and a thermos of coffee. "Sort of," I replied. "I mean, I work retail, but I've never shopped Black Friday for my family before." "Family shopping is the worst," she said matter-of-factly. "Everyone wants different things, nobody wants to wait, and somehow it's always your fault when something goes wrong. I learned years ago to shop for myself first, then deal with everyone else's demands." Her words stung because they felt too accurate. I was standing in a chaotic electronics store, holding a list of expensive items that would make Tyler happy, while my parents in Madison were probably enjoying leisurely browsing without the pressure of specific deadlines or expectations. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "Found the perfect designer bag. Jessica says the outlet stores are way less crowded than the main mall. This is so much better than standing in lines." Less crowded. While I was trapped in Electronics Emporium with what felt like half of Columbus, Madison was having a pleasant shopping experience with her friend. The unfairness of it made my chest tight with resentment I'd never allowed myself to feel before. Another text, this time from my mother. "Your father found great deals on the kitchen appliances. We're grabbing coffee and pastries while we wait for them to process the order. Hope you're having fun too." Fun. There was that word again. They were treating this like a vacation while I was working harder than I did during my actual job. The emoji felt like mockery, though I knew my mother meant it kindly. I looked around at the other people waiting for gaming equipment. Most were men Tyler's age, college students or recent graduates who were shopping for themselves. They chatted easily with each other about game releases and technical specifications, forming temporary friendships based on shared interests. Then there was me, the only person shopping for someone else, the only person who looked increasingly anxious as the numbers crawled forward with painful slowness. "Number 18, called out one of the teenage employees, and a guy near the front of the group whooped with excitement. Still 29 numbers ahead of me. I tried calling Tyler to update him on the delay, but my call went straight to voicemail. He was probably still hanging out with his new college friends, assuming I had everything under control because that's what I always did. Handled the logistics while everyone else enjoyed the benefits. The knot in my stomach grew tighter. What if I was doing this all wrong? What if there was a smarter strategy I was missing? What if other families had figured out a better system and I was just too inexperienced to know what it was? I watched a mother and her teenage son efficiently tag-team the situation. She held their place in line while he scouted other sections for backup options. They had clearly done this before and had developed a system based on mutual cooperation rather than delegation to one overwhelmed family member. Doubt crept in like cold air through a crack in the window. Maybe Tyler was right. Maybe I was overthinking this whole experience. Maybe the problem wasn't that my family had abandoned me with all the work. Maybe the problem was that I was too rigid, too controlling, too focused on perfect execution instead of just going with the flow. But even as I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, anger simmered beneath my self-doubt. I had spent weeks preparing for this day, researching deals, creating strategies, organizing everyone's wish lists into a cohesive plan. I had sacrificed sleep and personal time to make sure our Black Friday shopping would be successful. And now I was standing alone in a crowd of strangers, stressed about disappointing people who hadn't bothered to stick around long enough to help. "Number 25, the employee called out. My phone buzzed again. Tyler. "Yo, sis, how's the gaming stuff coming? These dudes I met want to grab breakfast after the store's open. Can you handle my list? You're the best." The casual assumption that I would handle everything while he socialized with strangers made something inside me crack. Not break, not yet, but develop a hairline fracture that would eventually split wide open. I typed back, "Still waiting in line. This might take longer than expected." His response came immediately. "No worries. You've got this. You always figure everything out." You always figure everything out. The phrase that had once sounded like a compliment now felt like a life sentence. I was the one who figured things out so that everyone else could live without worrying about details, logistics, or consequences. Around me, people were genuinely excited about their purchases. They talked passionately about games they wanted to play, showed off photos of their gaming setups at home, and debated the merits of different technical features. Their enthusiasm was infectious, but it also highlighted how disconnected I felt from the items on my list. I didn't know anything about Tyler's gaming preferences beyond what he'd written down. I didn't understand why he needed a 75-inch TV instead of something smaller and more affordable. I didn't know which games he actually played or what accessories would enhance his experience. I was shopping for a stranger, following instructions for purchases that would make someone else happy, while I was standing in an uncomfortable line, growing increasingly resentful with each passing minute. The woman next to me had struck up a conversation with another shopper about their Black Friday strategies. They shared war stories from previous years, tips for navigating crowded stores, and genuine camaraderie born from shared experience. "What about you?" the woman asked, turning to include me in the conversation. "What's your Black Friday strategy?" "I don't really have one. I'm just trying to get through my family shopping list without messing anything up." They both looked at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Was it pity, understanding, concern? Honey, Black Friday is supposed to be about getting things you want, not about being everyone else's personal shopper. The words hit like a revelation I wasn't ready to accept. The idea that I could be here for myself, pursuing my own interests and desires, felt foreign and selfish. But it also felt like a door opening to possibilities I'd never considered. "Number 32, called the employee. 15 more numbers. 15 more opportunities to question everything I thought I knew about my role in my family and my willingness to accept being useful rather than valued." The fear was growing stronger, but it wasn't fear of disappointing Tyler or failing to complete the shopping list. It was fear of the thoughts that were beginning to form in the back of my mind. Dangerous thoughts about what I deserved and what I was willing to accept. For the first time in my life, I was starting to wonder if being the reliable one was actually a choice I'd made or a trap I'd fallen into without realizing it. Number 47. The teenage employee's voice cut through the gaming section chaos like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. After an hour and 45 minutes of waiting, watching, and questioning everything about my family dynamics, it was finally my turn. I stepped forward on unsteady legs, Tyler's crumpled wish list in one hand, and my phone in the other, displaying the screenshots of exact model numbers and specifications I'd researched weeks ago. The employee, his name tag read Brandon, looked exhausted but tried to manage a customer service smile. "What can I get for you today?" he asked, already reaching for his scanning device. "I need the Samsung 75-inch OLED TV, the PlayStation 5 bundle with the extra controller, the gaming headset, and the extended warranty," I recited, reading directly from Tyler's list. Brandon's expression slightly shifted as he calculated the total. "That's going to be about $2,800 with tax. Big purchase. Gaming setup for yourself?" "It's for my brother,"
I replied automatically, then felt a strange pang saying those words out loud. Cool, cool, he's gonna love this setup. Let me grab everything from the stockroom. As Brandon disappeared to collect the items, I stood alone in the small, cleared space near the register, surrounded by the controlled chaos of other customers completing their purchases. The noise level had diminished slightly as the initial rush subsided, but the energy remained intense. My phone buzzed with another message from Madison. OMG Irish, Jessica and I found the most amazing vintage leather jacket at 70% off. I'm buying it for you as a thank you for handling all the boring shopping. You're going to look incredible in it. Love you. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times before its full impact hit me. Madison was buying me a gift, a thoughtful, expensive gift, because she felt guilty about leaving me to handle the boring shopping. She recognized that what I was doing was work, not fun, and she was trying to compensate with a material gesture. But the gesture also confirmed everything I'd been realizing during my long wait. To Madison, shopping for Tyler's gaming equipment was boring work that she was happy to avoid. She saw my contribution as a service that deserved payment, not as family cooperation that deserved participation. Another text arrived immediately after. The jacket is $180 after the discount. Is that okay? I know it's expensive, but you never buy anything nice for yourself. $180. More than I typically spent on clothes in 6 months. Madison was casually offering to spend that amount as a thank you gesture, highlighting the massive difference in our financial situations. Her internship at the prestigious law firm paid more in a month than I made in 3 months at the department store. Before I could respond, Tyler's message appeared. Yo, Irish, how's it going? These guys invited me to check out the new sneaker drop at Foot Locker. Mind if I catch up with you later? You've probably got everything handled anyway. The casual dismissal stung more than Madison's well-intentioned guilt gift. Tyler wasn't even pretending to care about the logistics of his expensive purchase. He'd assigned me the task and moved on to enjoy his morning, confident that I would figure out everything without requiring his input or assistance. Brandon returned with a cart loaded with boxes, the massive TV box, the gaming console bundle, accessories, warranties, and paperwork. The sight of everything Tyler wanted, neatly organized and ready for purchase, should have filled me with satisfaction. Instead, I felt empty. Okay, total comes to $2,847.63, Brandon announced. How are we paying today? The question hit me like cold water. In all my detailed planning, I had somehow overlooked the basic logistics of payment. Tyler had given me his debit card the night before, along with his PIN, but standing there looking at nearly $3,000 worth of gaming equipment, I realized I was about to spend more money in a single transaction than I made in 2 months. Debit card, I said, pulling Tyler's card from my wallet. As I handed it to Brandon, a disturbing thought occurred to me. Tyler could afford this gaming setup because he lived at home rent-free, had a partial soccer scholarship, and worked a campus job that paid better than my full-time retail position. Meanwhile, I was contributing to household expenses and struggling to save for my own apartment. The transaction processed successfully, but as Brandon loaded the boxes onto a store cart, I realized I faced a new problem. How was I supposed to transport $2,800 worth of electronics through a crowded mall and back to the parking lot without help? The TV box alone was nearly as tall as I was and definitely too heavy for me to manage alone. Do you need help getting this to your car? Brandon asked, apparently reading my expression. That would be amazing, I replied, feeling grateful for the first genuine kindness I had experienced all morning. I can't leave the department, but I can call for a cart attendant to help you out. Might take a few minutes, though. Everyone's pretty swamped today. A few minutes turned into 20 minutes of standing guard over Tyler's expensive purchases, while waves of shoppers flowed around me. I tried calling my family to coordinate a meeting point, but none of them answered their phones. Madison was probably in a dressing room trying on vintage jackets. Tyler was examining sneakers with his new friends. My parents were likely enjoying their leisurely coffee break. Finally, a cart attendant arrived, a woman about my age named Rosa, who looked like she had been working since the store opened. Electronics Emporium to parking lot? She asked, already maneuvering the cart towards the exit. Yes, thank you so much. I honestly don't know how I would have managed this alone. Black Friday is crazy, Rosa agreed as we navigated through the crowds. I've been doing this for 3 years and it never gets easier. At least you got everything you wanted, though. That's a nice gaming setup.
It's for my brother, I explained again, and again felt that strange discomfort with the words. That's really generous of you, Rosa replied. Gaming systems are expensive. Your brother's lucky to have someone who cares that much. Her comment stopped me mid-step. Generous? She thought I was being generous, buying my brother an expensive gift, but I wasn't being generous. I was being used as a shopping service by someone who had the money to buy these things himself, but couldn't be bothered to wait in line for them. Actually, I said slowly, he paid for it. I'm just picking it up for him. Rose's expression shifted slightly. Oh, well, that's still really nice of you to handle all the shopping. Standing in those lines is rough. Nice, generous, helpful. All words that sounded positive but felt increasingly hollow. I was realizing that what others saw as kindness, I was starting to recognize as something else entirely. An inability to say no, a desperate need for approval, a willingness to accept scraps of appreciation in exchange for substantial sacrifices of my time and energy. We reached my family's Honda Civic, and I opened the trunk to reveal a space that was clearly too small for Tyler's purchases. The TV box alone took up 3/4 of the available room. The gaming console and accessories had to be squeezed into the back seat, leaving barely enough room for passengers. You're going to need a bigger car, Rosa observed with a sympathetic smile. I tipped her $10 from my own wallet, money I couldn't really afford to spend but felt obligated to give because she'd been so helpful. As she walked back toward the store, I stood alone in the parking lot, surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of electronics I'd spent 2 hours acquiring for someone who was currently shopping for sneakers. My phone showed several missed calls from my mother and a string of increasingly urgent text messages. Irish, where are you? We're ready to leave. The stores are getting too crowded. We want to head home soon. Call me back immediately. The final message had arrived just 5 minutes ago. We're in the car. Meet us at the front entrance in 10 minutes or we're leaving without you. Leaving without me. After I'd spent nearly 3 hours completing Tyler's shopping, while they enjoyed a leisurely morning, they were threatening to abandon me at the mall if I didn't drop everything and run to meet their schedule. I looked at Tyler's gaming equipment packed into our small car, then at my phone showing my family's growing impatience, then at the sprawling mall complex where they were expecting me to abandon thousands of dollars worth of electronics to accommodate their timeline. For the first time in my 23 years, I felt something crystallize inside me that I'd never experienced before, the clear, undeniable recognition that what was happening to me was unfair. Not just mildly annoying or slightly disappointing, but fundamentally, unacceptably unfair. I could run to meet them, leaving Tyler's expensive purchases unguarded in an unlocked car in a crowded parking lot. I could apologize for taking too long, thank them for their patience, and spend the ride home listening to stories about their successful shopping adventures while I sat cramped between gaming equipment I'd spent my morning acquiring for someone else. Or I could make a different choice. I could choose myself for the first time in my life. Standing in that parking lot, surrounded by evidence of my family's casual willingness to use my time and energy without reciprocation, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being the family shopping service. I was done accepting thankless tasks disguised as family togetherness. I was done being grateful for the privilege of making everyone else's life easier while my own needs remained invisible and unmet. I picked up my phone and typed a message that felt like jumping off a cliff. I'm not coming. Handle your own transportation. I'll find my own way home. And then before I could change my mind, I hit send. My phone exploded with notifications within 30 seconds of sending that message. The barrage began with my mother's ringtone, followed immediately by text messages, missed call alerts, and what sounded like a family group chat emergency session. I stood next to the Honda Civic in the Easton Town Center parking lot, watching my phone light up like a Christmas tree. And for the first time in my life, I didn't immediately answer. The first voicemail came from my mother, her voice tight with controlled panic. Irish, what do you mean you're not coming? We have Tyler's gaming equipment. We need to coordinate this. Call me back right now. The second was from my father, using his stern business voice. "Young lady, this is not the time for games. Your mother is worried sick. Get to the front entrance immediately." Tyler's message was more direct. "Sis, what the hell? You have my $3,000 gaming setup. You can't just disappear with it." But it was Madison's text that revealed the most about how my family truly saw me. "Irish, I know you're probably overwhelmed and having some kind of breakdown, but this isn't like you. You're the responsible one. Just come to the car and we'll figure this out." A breakdown. As if standing up for myself was a mental health crisis rather than a long overdue assertion of basic self-respect. I turned off my phone. The silence that followed felt strange and liberating. No buzzing notifications, no immediate demands for my attention, no crisis management requiring my input. Just me, standing in a parking lot on Black Friday morning, surrounded by expensive electronics I'd purchased for someone who was more concerned about his gaming setup than my well-being. But liberation quickly gave way to practical panic. I had just stranded myself at a shopping center 30 miles from home with no transportation, limited money, and thousands of dollars worth of gaming equipment that didn't belong to me. My act of rebellion was starting to feel less empowering and more terrifying. A security guard was making his rounds through the parking lot, and I realized I couldn't stand next to an unlocked car full of expensive electronics indefinitely without drawing unwanted attention. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. I locked Tyler's gaming equipment in the car, pocketed the keys, and walked back toward the mall entrance. The crowds had thinned slightly as the initial Black Friday rush subsided, but the energy remained intense. Families pushed carts loaded with purchases, couples debated over electronics, and individuals moved with the focused determination of people working through carefully planned shopping lists. Everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing, except me. I found an empty bench near the food court and sat down to assess my situation. I had $43 in cash, a debit card with maybe $200 available, and a family that was probably organizing a search party. I also had Tyler's car keys, which meant I held the only access to nearly $3,000 worth of gaming equipment. For the first time in this entire ordeal, I had leverage. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. I'd never had leverage in my family. I'd always been the one asking for rides, borrowing money, depending on others for basic necessities. But right now, Tyler needed something from me more than I needed anything from him. My stomach growled, reminding me that I'd been awake since 4 a.m. and hadn't eaten anything since a piece of toast 6 hours ago. The food court offered dozens of options, from fast food to sit-down restaurants, and I realized I could choose anything I wanted without considering anyone else's preferences or dietary restrictions. I ordered a breakfast sandwich, hash browns, and coffee from a cafe that my family would have dismissed as overpriced. The total came to $12, more than I usually spent on lunch, but I handed over the money without calculating whether I could afford it. For once, I was prioritizing my immediate needs over long-term financial anxiety. While I ate, I watched other Black Friday shoppers and began noticing patterns I'd missed during my family-focused morning. Solo shoppers moved differently than families. They browsed more leisurely, made decisions more quickly, and seemed generally less stressed. They weren't negotiating competing agendas or managing multiple people's expectations. A woman about my age sat down at the table next to mine, surrounded by shopping bags from stores I'd never been able to afford. She was scrolling through her phone, occasionally laughing at something she was reading, completely absorbed in her own world. "Excuse me," I said impulsively. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up with mild curiosity. "Sure." "Are you shopping alone today?" "Yeah," she replied, seeming slightly puzzled by the question. I always shop alone on Black Friday. Way less stressful than trying to coordinate with other people. "Don't you feel selfish? Just buying things for yourself?" She laughed, but nodding kindly. "Selfish? It's my money and my time. Why would spending them on myself be selfish?" Her response was so matter-of-fact that it highlighted how twisted my thinking had become. I'd been conditioned to see self-advocacy as selfishness and self-sacrifice as virtue. But this stranger was casually articulating a perspective that felt revolutionary, that my time and money belonged to me, and using them for my own benefit was normal, not selfish. "Can I ask you another question?" I continued. "What would you do if your family expected you to spend your Black Friday shopping for them instead of yourself?" "I'd tell them to make their own plans," she said without hesitation. "Black Friday is crazy enough without turning it into free labor for other people." Free labor. She'd named something I'd never had words for. My family hadn't asked me to join them for a fun shopping adventure. They'd recruited me to provide free labor while they enjoyed the benefits. "But what if they got angry?" I pressed. "What if they said you were being irresponsible or letting them down?" She studied my face more carefully, and I could see her recognizing something in my expression. "Honey, are you okay? You sound like you're in some kind of situation." The kindness in her voice almost broke my composure. A complete stranger was showing more concern for my well-being than my own family had demonstrated all morning. "I think I'm having a family crisis," I admitted. "I've been shopping for them all morning while they did their own thing, and when I finally said I wasn't coming when they called, they're acting like I'm having a mental breakdown." "Are you financially dependent on them?" she asked. "I live at home, but I pay rent and expenses. I have my own job." "Then you're not having a breakdown," she said firmly. "You're growing a backbone. It's about time." Growing a backbone. The phrase resonated in a way that felt both encouraging and overwhelming. I was 23 years old, and I was just now learning to stand up for myself in the most basic ways. "What should I do now?" I asked. "What do you want to do?" she countered. "Not what you should do or what would make other people happy, but what would make you happy right now." The questions stumped me completely. I couldn't remember the last time I'd made a decision based purely on what I wanted, rather than what others expected or needed from me. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Then start there," she suggested. "Figure out what you actually want. The rest will follow." She gathered her shopping bags and stood to leave. "Good luck, and remember, you don't owe anyone an explanation for taking care of yourself." After she left, I sat in the food court for another hour, watching people and thinking about her question. What did I want? I wanted to stop feeling guilty every time I considered my own needs. I wanted to make decisions without constantly calculating how they would affect other people's convenience. I wanted to have enough money to buy a $12 breakfast without anxiety. I wanted to feel valued for who I was, not just for what I could do for others. But more immediately, I wanted to finish Black Friday shopping for myself. I pulled out my phone and turned it back on. 47 missed calls and 63 text messages greeted me, ranging from concerned to angry to manipulative. But buried among the family drama was something I'd forgotten about: my own Black Friday shopping list. For weeks, I'd been researching deals for my family while completely ignoring the things I wanted for myself. I'd bookmarked a laptop that would help me take online classes, professional clothes that would help me interview for better jobs, and art supplies that would let me explore creative interests I'd abandoned years ago. I stood up from the food court table, pocketed my phone without responding to any messages, and walked toward the electronics store that sold laptops. For the first time in my life, I was going shopping for myself on Black Friday. The feeling was terrifying and exhilarating and completely unfamiliar, but it felt like the beginning of something important. The laptop I wanted was gone. After an hour of building courage to shop for myself, I stood in the electronics section of Best Buy staring at an empty display where the discounted HP Pavilion should have been. The one I'd researched for months, the one that would let me take online classes and maybe start freelance graphic design work. The sale tag was still there, mocking me with its 40% off promise, but the actual laptops had vanished. "Sold out about an hour ago," said a sales associate who appeared beside me. "Black Friday laptops go fast. Should have gotten here earlier." Should have gotten here earlier. If I hadn't spent 3 hours shopping for Tyler's gaming equipment, if I hadn't been playing family coordinator while everyone else pursued their own interests, I would have been here in time. My first attempt at prioritizing myself had been sabotaged by the very pattern I was trying to break. I pulled out my phone to check for alternatives and immediately regretted it. The notification count had climbed to over 100. My family's panic had escalated to what looked like a full-scale emergency response. The most recent message was from my father. Irish, I'm calling the police if you don't respond in the next 30 minutes. This behavior is completely unacceptable. Calling the police because I'd spent 4 hours not answering my phone while shopping at a public mall? The threat felt both ridiculous and genuinely scary. My father wasn't prone to dramatic gestures, and if he was threatening police involvement, my family's panic had reached irrational levels. A new text from Madison appeared as I was reading. Irish, whatever is going on with you, we can fix it, but you need to come home now. Dad is furious, and Tyler is threatening to report his gaming stuff stolen. This is getting out of hand. Tyler was threatening to report his own property stolen because I wasn't answering my phone fast enough? The gaming equipment he'd asked me to buy with his money using his debit card was somehow now potential evidence in a theft case because I'd taken too long to return it? The absurdity would have been funny if it weren't so revealing about how my family viewed my autonomy. In their minds, I existed to serve their needs on their timeline. Any deviation from that role was treated as a crisis requiring immediate correction. But the threat about police involvement scared me enough to call my mother back. She answered before the first ring finished. Irish, thank God, where are you? What is wrong with you today? I'm shopping, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. At the mall, like we planned. Shopping? Irish, it's been 4 hours. We've been worried sick. Your father thinks you've been kidnapped or had some kind of mental breakdown. I sent you a message telling you I wasn't coming to the car. How is that being kidnapped? That message made no sense. You just disappeared with Tyler's expensive gaming equipment. Do you understand how that looks? I could hear my father's voice in the background but couldn't make out the words. My mother covered the phone briefly, then came back sounding even more frazzled. Your father wants to know exactly where you are right now. He's coming to get you. I have the car keys, I pointed out. How is he going to get me? He called an Uber. Irish, you're being completely irrational. Just tell me where you are and we'll come pick you up. We can discuss whatever is bothering you at home. Discuss whatever is bothering you. As if my reaction to being treated like unpaid labor was a minor mood swing that could be resolved with a family meeting. I'm not ready to come home yet, I said, surprised by my own firmness. What do you mean you're not ready? Irish, you don't get to just decide to disappear for an entire day. You live in our house, you're part of this family, and you have responsibilities. Responsibilities. The word hit like a slap because it revealed so clearly how one-sided those responsibilities were. My responsibility was to be available when they needed me, but their responsibility to include me or consider my needs was apparently optional. I'll be home later tonight, I said. Tyler's gaming equipment is safe. Nobody has stolen anything. I just need some time to think. Time to think? What about? Irish, you're scaring us. For a moment, I almost caved. The distress in my mother's voice was real, and my instinct was to rush back and apologize, to soothe everyone's anxiety and return to the familiar role of family peacekeeper. But then I remembered the woman in the food court asking what I wanted, and I realized that my family's panic wasn't really about my safety. It was about their loss of control over me. I called you in a few hours, I said, and hung up before she could respond. I immediately turned my phone to airplane mode, but the damage was done. My brief moment of shopping confidence had evaporated under the weight of family pressure. I no longer felt like an independent adult exploring her freedom. I felt like a runaway child causing unnecessary drama. The retail therapy I'd been looking forward to now felt hollow and forced. I wandered through several stores, picking up items I'd wanted for months, but everything seemed overpriced and unnecessary. The professional blouses I'd bookmarked looked too ambitious for someone who couldn't even handle a family shopping trip. The art supplies seemed frivolous for someone who was
causing her parents to call police? In the clothing store's dressing room, trying on a blazer I'd been saving for, I caught sight of myself in the three-way mirror and barely recognized the person looking back. My hair was disheveled from the morning's stress, my face was flushed with anxiety, and my eyes looked wild in a way that made me understand why my family was concerned. Maybe I was having some kind of breakdown. Maybe my reaction to this morning was disproportionate and irrational. Maybe the healthy response would have been to discuss my feelings calmly with my family, instead of disappearing with Tyler's expensive gaming equipment. The doubt crept in like poison, undermining everything I'd felt so certain about just hours earlier. The stranger in the food court had made standing up for myself sound simple and natural. But sitting alone in a dressing room, surrounded by clothes I couldn't afford, while my family panicked about my whereabouts, self-advocacy felt selfish and destructive. I put the blazer back on its hanger and left the store empty-handed. Walking through the mall, I noticed things I'd missed during my earlier confidence surge. Security cameras everywhere, tracking everyone's movements. Security guards who seemed to be paying special attention to people shopping alone. Signs about unattended bags and suspicious behavior. What if my father had actually called the police? What if they were looking for me based on some exaggerated story about a family member disappearing with stolen property? What if my grand gesture of independence was about to turn into a humiliating encounter with mall security? I found another bench and tried to think rationally about my situation. I had Tyler's car keys and his gaming equipment. I had refused to meet my family when they called. I had been unreachable for several hours while they grew increasingly frantic. From their perspective, my behavior probably did seem erratic and concerning. But from my perspective, I had spent the morning providing unpaid shopping services while my family enjoyed themselves, then finally asserted one boundary when they demanded I abandon expensive electronics to meet their schedule. Both perspectives felt true simultaneously, which made it impossible to know whether I was finally standing up for myself or having some kind of emotional crisis. My stomach was churning with anxiety, and my hands were shaking slightly. The breakfast I'd eaten hours ago felt like it was sitting in my throat. I realized I hadn't used the bathroom or drunk water since early morning, and my body was starting to protest the stress and neglect. In the restroom, splashing cold water on my face, I caught another glimpse of myself in the mirror. I looked exhausted and overwhelmed, but not crazy. I looked like someone who was having a difficult day, not someone who was having a mental breakdown. The distinction felt important. I dried my face with paper towels and made a decision. I wasn't ready to go home and resume my role as family coordinator, but I also couldn't spend the entire day hiding in a mall bathroom. I needed to figure out what I actually wanted to do next, beyond just avoiding my family's panic. I turned my phone back on long enough to send a group text. I'm safe and thinking. I'll be home by 8 p.m. with Tyler's gaming equipment. Please stop threatening to call police. I just need some space today. Then I turned it off again before I could see their responses. I had 6 hours to figure out who I wanted to be when I went home. The question was whether that would be enough time to find an answer.
I walked into Target at 6:30 p.m. with a completely different energy than I'd had all day. Something had shifted during my 6 hours of solitude at the mall, and I finally understood what I needed to do. The store was nearly empty compared to the morning chaos. Black Friday shoppers had either completed their missions or given up in exhaustion. The employees looked tired but relieved that the worst of the day was behind them. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a practical, no-nonsense glow that matched my newfound clarity. I wasn't here to shop for clothes I couldn't afford or electronics that were already sold out. I was here to buy things I actually needed, with my own money, for my own life. First stop,
the phone accessories section. I bought a portable charger, a phone case with a wallet attachment, and a car mount. These weren't luxury items or impulse purchases. They were tools that would make my daily life easier and more independent. Next, basic apartment supplies, storage containers, a coffee maker, bed linens, towels, and a small toolkit. Everything I'd need to move out of my parents' house and into my own space. The total was approaching $200, which would normally have sent me into financial anxiety, but I felt calm about the expense. These purchases were investments in my freedom. At the checkout, the cashier, a woman around my mother's age, made small talk while scanning my items. "Moving out?" she asked, noting the apartment supplies. "Yes," I said, and realized it was the first time I'd said those words out loud. "Good for you," she replied with genuine warmth. "It's scary at first, but there's nothing like having your own space." As I loaded my purchases into shopping bags, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with getting deals or completing someone else's wish list. These were my choices, made with my money for my benefit. Walking back through the mall toward the parking lot, I passed the electronics emporium, where I'd spent 3 hours waiting in line for Tyler's gaming equipment. The store was nearly empty now. Just a few employees restocking shelves and cleaning up the debris from the morning rush. I thought about the person I'd been at 6 a.m., desperate for family approval, willing to sacrifice my own comfort for the chance to be useful, convinced that my value depended on how much inconvenience I could absorb for others. That person felt like a stranger now. At the Honda Civic, Tyler's gaming equipment sat exactly where I'd left it hours earlier, undisturbed and secure. Nearly $3,000 worth of electronics that he'd entrusted to me because he knew I was reliable, responsible, and would never let him down. He wasn't wrong about those qualities, but what he'd never understood, what none of them had understood, was that reliability without reciprocity wasn't a virtue. It was exploitation disguised as family dynamics. I loaded my Target purchases into the car alongside Tyler's gaming equipment, and the contrast was striking. His expensive toys took up most of the space, purchased with money he could afford to spend because he lived rent-free and had minimal responsibilities. My practical purchases fit into 2 small bags, bought with carefully saved money from a job that barely covered my basic expenses. But for the first time, I felt prouder of my modest purchases than resentful of his expensive ones. I turned my phone back on for the first time in hours. The notification count had reached biblical proportions: missed calls, voicemails, text messages, and what appeared to be several family group chat conversations about my situation. Instead of reading through the backlog of panic and manipulation, I composed a single message to the family group chat. "I'm heading home now with Tyler's gaming equipment. I've spent the day thinking about our family dynamics, and I need to make some changes. We'll talk when I get there, but I want everyone to know that I'm completely fine. Today was about me learning to prioritize my own needs for the first time in my life. See you soon." I hit send and immediately turned the phone back to airplane mode. Whatever their reactions were, I'd deal with them in person. The drive home through Columbus's suburban streets gave me time to prepare for the conversation I knew was coming. My family would want explanations, apologies, and reassurance that I'd return to my familiar role. They'd probably frame my behavior as stress, temporary rebellion, or a phase I needed to work through. But I had a different narrative prepared. I wasn't having a breakdown. I was having a breakthrough. I wasn't being selfish. I was learning the difference between self-care and selfishness. I wasn't abandoning my family. I was establishing boundaries that would make our relationships healthier and more balanced. The house was blazing with lights when I pulled into the driveway. Through the front window, I could see my family gathered in the living room, their body language tense with worry and frustration.
They'd probably been having crisis meetings all day, trying to understand my erratic behavior and plan their intervention. I sat in the car for a moment, looking at the home I'd lived in for 23 years, and realized something profound. It no longer felt like my permanent address. It felt like a temporary stopping point while I figured out my next step. Tyler appeared at the front door before I'd even turned off the engine, relief and annoyance warring across his face. Behind him, I could see my parents and Madison crowding toward the entrance. "Irish," Tyler called out, jogging toward the car. "Jesus Christ, where have you been? Do you have any idea how worried we've been?" I got out of the car slowly, my Target bags in one hand and his car keys in the other. "I've been shopping," I said calmly, "for myself, for the first time in years." He looked confused by my tone. I wasn't apologetic or defensive, just matter of fact. "Shopping? Irish, you disappeared for 12 hours with $3,000 of my stuff. We thought something terrible had happened." "Nothing terrible happened," I replied, opening the trunk to reveal his gaming equipment exactly as I'd packed it. "Everything's here, exactly as you left it." Madison and my parents had reached the driveway by now, and I could see the complex mix of emotions on their faces: relief that I was safe, frustration about the day's drama, and confusion about my unexpectedly calm demeanor. "Irish, honey, we need to talk about today. Your behavior was very concerning." "You're right," I agreed. "We do need to talk. But first, Tyler, help me get your gaming equipment inside. It's heavy, and I've been managing it alone all day." This simple request, asking him to carry his own purchases, seemed to surprise him. For a moment, he looked like he might argue or ask why I couldn't handle it myself. Then he seemed to register the shift in my tone and wordlessly began lifting boxes from the trunk. As we carried his expensive gaming setup into the house, I felt a symbolic weight lifting from my shoulders. I wasn't responsible for managing Tyler's belongings, coordinating my family's logistics, or absorbing their anxiety about situations I hadn't created. I was responsible for my own choices, my own happiness, and my own future. And for the first time in my 23 years, that felt like exactly the right amount of responsibility. "Now," I said, setting down the last box in our living room and facing my family, "let's talk about what's going to change." The conversation that followed would reshape everything about how the White family functioned. But that was a story for tomorrow. Tonight, I was simply Irish White. Not the family coordinator, not the reliable one, not the person who solved everyone else's problems. Just Irish. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.